Welcome everybody to another episode of my podcast and my vlog. So hello, if you're watching on YouTube. I don't know why I wave because I'm not sure anybody does watch on YouTube. However, I do know that one person does watch my YouTube stuff, and that is the awesome Jakob, who is my guest today. As always, my listeners will know I'm always delighted to have my my guests on. And Jakob is not, how can I put this politely, the usual kind of guest that I might have on. And this is the reason I wanted to do this podcast. So Jakob is 18 and his LinkedIn profile describes himself as an aspiring 18-year-old entrepreneur looking to make a change in the world. So Jakob reached out to me connected with me on LinkedIn over the summer, I think it was. And I was kind of intrigued, shall I say, as to why Jakob wanted to connect with me. And then he mentioned that he had actually been watching some of my videos on YouTube about building out the profile, hence wanted to connect. I then looked at Jakob's profile. Jakob runs his own podcast, which is awesome. So Jakob very kindly asked me to be on his podcast, and this is the return favor of Jakob being on my podcast, where I don't like putting labels on things, but Jakob is Gen Z, if we're going to do that label, or Generation Z. So I was intrigued to get Jakob on just to get his view of the world of social, digital, where he wants to go with his career and so on and so forth. So I will now shut up and hand over to Jakob. Wonderful to have you here. Who, what, why, when, where, and let's see where this goes.
Yeah, hi Alex, hi everyone listening, and thanks for having me on the podcast. So, yeah, as Alex said, I'm 18 years old. I've just completed and got the results for my A-levels, which I did business, maths, and economics. And yeah, I'm now working in a company that's developing an app for commercial expenses, and that's where I'm at so far. Yeah.
Cool. So do you want to share your results with us on air? You don't feel you have to if you don't want to?
No, I did all right. I got an A* in business and an A in economics and a B in maths.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah. Much better than me. I got 3 Bs in French, Spanish and English. So you're already onto a winner there. So your background in terms of, say, GCSEs, A-levels, then I saw you did, we've all done it, a waiter, so I've done that, and then a marketing trainee at a bakery. Then you got a director at Lunite full-time. So what's that all about?
That was a company I set up with my friend from, I think I was about 17, 17. And we basically did the typical teenager business where we ordered a load of stuff from Alibaba and tried to sell it, but then we got into I don't know if you've heard of it, Amazon FBA.
Yeah.
Where we started selling products on Amazon, and we earned quite a bit of money from it. But yeah, that was that, and there's not really too much going on at the moment whilst I took on my new job. Cool. But yeah, it's still there. It was just a typical teenage business, to be honest.
I like the way you describe it as and this, I suppose, is the difference between the world that you're growing up in versus the world that I grew up in when I was a teenager. Yeah. None of this existed. So typical teenage business. I think the closest for me was I had a very entrepreneurial friend called Tom Gittins, if he's listening, and I lived in the Cotswolds out in the countryside, and he set up his own video store to try and take on Blockbuster. So you will have no idea what I'm talking about, maybe, but we had these things called video VHS cassettes where you went and hired them, and I worked in his shop for a while. And the other aspect was working on a building site as a labourer for 6 months to earn some pennies. So already I'm seeing this is fascinating. That's what you see as a typical teenager just setting up. I mean, it's similar to kind of drop shipping, quasi sort of thing, isn't it? You buy the stock, hold it elsewhere, someone goes to Amazon or wherever you buys it, and then you make a margin on that. And I do see a lot of people on sort of more so on YouTube, now on TikTok, around kind of pushing the promise of millions and riches and passive income.
I think the Amazon FBA model is a lot more sustainable, and I think it's an actual way to earn money rather than the drop shipping, which is just so many people in it now, and not really a model you can use anymore. But everyone gets this image in their head that they can be like the people promoting it, and I guess that's where a lot of teenagers and people my age and a bit younger get into it, just they sell you the dream and you think might as well give it a go. Like, what have you got to lose? But
I mean, I think absolutely in this day and age, but like anything in life, if it's too good to be generally,
yeah,
it
probably is.
generally is. And just quickly, just for some of our listeners who may not know what we're talking about, Amazon FBA, do you want to just quickly just explain what that means and what that is?
Yeah, so basically Amazon FBA is where you source products. So you go on Amazon, you see what's already selling. There's a few different models, but the way we did it was that you go on Amazon, you see what's already selling on there. You can get software that tells you how many times a day and things are selling.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just reach out to wholesalers and see if you can get them any cheaper from a wholesaler. Yeah. And then you can send them to Amazon. So you order 100, 200 products, whatever. You send them to Amazon individually packed, and then Amazon will sell them and ship them for you, basically. So it's a good model, and it's how you get Amazon Prime products on Amazon without Amazon selling it themselves. So it's other people sending it to Amazon's warehouses, and then Amazon deal with it there, basically. Yeah.
Cool. And what was it that you were selling?
Mostly with stationery, like pencils and things. That's where we found the most margins. Yeah.
Just it's incredible, right? You know, there I was thinking you're going to come out with some, you know, newfangled toy, or they just
no.
You know, for pencils and stationery, and you know, the commercial side, that's where you can make the most margins. So.
Yeah, a few toys are on there. Like you can go into Tesco and see what they've got in the reduced section, and then see if they're selling for more on Amazon. But it is quite a fun thing to do. But yeah.
It's the modern. I would say the modern day kind of Gary Vee in his kind of garage sales, or
garage,
that scanning it and then flipping it for profit. You know, fair play, kudos to you for getting out there and doing it, and earning a bit of cash on the side. So you now got your first role, so commercial lead at Fleet Partnership Solutions. So what's well, that's this. I had a quick look on the thing. They do kind of license verification or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the business that's been going since 2002. But we're looking at the person that's employed me is looking at building a new bit of software that goes into the expense side of things. It's all new and nothing's really out yet. But that's what we're working on. Looking at the expense side. So I'm learning a lot on the app development, web development, how to grow a business from scratch and things like that. So it's really useful. Yeah, it's a good thing to be into at this age, I think.
Fantastic. You know, absolutely. And if I so you did your A levels, and my listeners will know my brain kind of goes all over the place. So I have no real structure to this. But is the plan to go to university or college or something to that effect, or are you just going to basically stay in the commercial world and become the next Richard Branson?
Yeah, so the thing is, with the school I went to, they were very pushy about university, and they didn't really, they had the careers office, but they didn't provide you with many other options. You had to actively go out and seek an apprenticeship or and things like this. And yeah, they wanted you to go to uni, basically. So I had that from a young age and pushing me to university. But then I just had to look at something different, because obviously I listened to a lot of people like Gary Vee and people like that, and they suggest just trying new things. So I looked at things different, and I actually got an apprenticeship with Ernst & Young. EY, the
big accounting audit firm.
Yeah, but I decided to turn that down to go with this business, because I think I'll just learn a lot more here than being at the bottom of the ladder in a big corporate. But it was still a good opportunity, and I've still got a place at Leeds University, which I deferred to next year.
Fantastic.
So I've got that as a backup, doing business management there. So yeah, I've got a few options, and I'll just see where life takes me for the next year, really.
I think you are young enough to make mistakes, as it were, and kind of plough your own kind of furrow. And I think if I reflect on, university for me was good fun. It was 4 years doing a language degree at Exeter. I was very fortunate. I was the last kind of cohort where it was free, so the government paid for for my education. And reflecting on my education and what I did there has absolutely no bearing on kind of where I'm at now and what I've been doing and how I've gone through that. That's kind of almost been on the job learning and training and kind of self-growth in terms of wanting to understand more around kind of my world is kind of digital sales, social selling, and et cetera. And my perspective now on university, and I think hindsight is a fine thing, is unless you want to do something where it is required, so doctor, lawyer, all that kind of stuff, any kind of scientific stuff, if you have the opportunity and the wherewithal to take some time out and kind of get in there and start kind of what you're doing, building your own business, doing your own thing and trying things before going to university, then absolutely do it. Because if you choose to go to Leeds, and my sister-in-law went to Leeds, had an amazing time there, absolutely, loved it. It's a cracking university. You will learn stuff, absolutely. You'll make networks and you'll make connections with people, which is incredibly important. But from my perspective, I think there's now so much more, dare I say, opportunity, which you've already proven in the fact that a typical teenager just starting up, their own online e-commerce business, that it's not necessarily kind of that defined, path. And loads of clips of Gary Vee telling parents not to send their kids to college and this and that. So we were talking about this before we came on air, and from my perspective, I don't like putting kind of profiles on kind of ages, because I don't necessarily believe in it. David Allison, he's an amazing chap. He talks about value graphics rather than demographics. So you want to kind of market and sell to people's values rather than whether they're 18 or 80. But it must have been, I guess, an interesting kind of time for you over the last kind of 12 to 18 months that are going through lockdown. So from the perspective of an 18-year-old, what has the last kind of 18 months meant for you? And has it kind of changed your outlook on the world and maybe where you want to go and what you want to do? What's kind of been the narrative and the conversation within your peers?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of good and bad sides to it, but generally speaking, from what I've seen in like the social aspect of things, like it was a very hard time, like for people my age, because I turned 18 during lockdown. Obviously that's when you want to be going out, having fun, doing all this fun stuff. But like even from the school point of view, like the school had to bring in a mental health nurse. Obviously people were struggling, and mental health did become a big thing during that. And I think a lot of people have realized that. But more specifically, I found it like as a time you can just get your head down and like research something. And I don't think I'd be doing what I was doing now if I didn't have it. Because it was a time where you can use it. Obviously there was times where it was hard just being locked in your room and doing nothing basically, but then it just made you want to be productive. And because you weren't going out every weekend and things like this, you actually had time to do things. So yeah, there was good and bad to it, and I think it's obviously led me to where I am now. But yeah, a lot of people did benefit from it. And I think a lot of people have looked back and seen it as a time they could have used, but they did waste.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people have started like things like TikTok and stuff like this. And now some people I know have got 1 million followers on it just from starting during lockdown.
Yeah.
And that's where they are now. But yeah, there was a lot of difference. Everyone's unique, obviously, and each person dealt with it differently. But the general few things were like the mental health side, where that was quite poor. And then obviously people were starting their own businesses and things like this, which was good to see. Yeah. But yeah, that was the rough outline of what happened, I think, from my generation.
And I think the mental health kind of conversation has really kind of been brought to bear across all age profiles. And it's really for large organizations, small organizations, it was a real shift in terms of how they had to, in the space of basically 24 hours, spin up into a completely remote environment. And then, people having different working environments at home in terms of setup, access to technology, and so on. So it's, even for me, I found it incredibly hard. I had moments of real kind of, and back then, I had my own business, and incredibly stressful when you kind of watch your pipeline evaporate in a matter of hours, where clients, just not spending money on external consultants. And it wasn't unique for me, but of course you're sitting there, I'm sitting there going, how are you going to pay the mortgage next month? And it kind of just brought to bear kind of everything. It feels like we're now on the coming through the other side of it, having to get through the winter. But I also, the interesting thing from my perspective is that if I look at kind of what I went through when I was 18, 19, 20, very lucky when I was able to go on a gap year, funded by my parents, which was very, very generous of them. But we had a lot less to to deal with, because we didn't have social media. We didn't have this kind of this pressure of, dare I say, always on. And I reflect, back on our PS2, PS3, and playing Doom and kind of all those games, and kind of how I reflecting on going, God, and YouTube was a thing kind of back then, just starting. If one had thought to get onto YouTube and start recording you playing video games, where that could have led you, but we just did not have this kind of level of pressure, dare I say it, and dare I say also addiction in some cases.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of social media, kind of more broadly, I mean, what channels are you on, and what are you seeing again in your community, your peers, in terms of what impact that is having, both positive, because you wouldn't be able to do what you do without the access to kind of all this amazing stuff, but also the negative side of things?
Yeah, so regarding what platforms are on, I'm quite a technological person. I'm interested in a lot of technology, and I'm on pretty much everything there is, as are a lot of people my age. Even if they don't use it, I'm sure they've got a profile on almost every platform now. But the thing with social media, I find, is that you're always on. As you said, you're always with people. It feels like you're always with people. You're always sending pictures to people, always messaging people. There's not a minute until you actually go to bed. Like, even people say stay off your phone half an hour before you go to bed, but I don't think many people do. Like, until the moment you actually go to bed, and then you wake up and you're back on it. You're just always messaging. You've got notifications popping up, and it is addictive. Like, you see something pop up, you just flick at your phone, like, but you don't realize it, but it is an addiction. And I think that's just the way we're living now, and like the way TikTok and social medias are created to addict you. I think it's natural for us all to be addicted to them, because that's what they're intending to do. So yeah, but obviously there is good sides to it. Like, within, I think, 2-3 days, my whole school had Zoom set up. All the teachers were trained on it. Something like that. Like, you wouldn't be able to do that to 10-20 years ago. Like, it just wouldn't, even less than that, you wouldn't be able to do it. People wouldn't be able to use it. So it let us keep our education up, and now, like, my job is working from my computer. The offices are just north of London, so obviously I can't get down there. I live near Birmingham, so I can't get there every day, but it allows me to do a role like that just from my computer, and I can call people and interact with people as if I am in an office, which is good. And also like the connection side of things, like obviously meeting people like you through LinkedIn, like we talked about it on my podcast. I think LinkedIn's a really powerful platform that a lot of people my generation haven't got a hold of yet.
Yeah.
But just being able to reach out to almost anyone, and on a platform like LinkedIn, anyone will help you almost if they reply. And you can get started in a conversation and end up with something like this, where you're always learning and building connections. But I think just building a routine into it and trying to take time away, as hard as it is good, but it's just not something that seems viable to our generation for some reason.
Well, it's not your, I mean, so it's all generations, and I dread the I have an iPhone when it gives you a screen time at the end of each week, what you've been doing. Of course, the challenge is that this has been forced upon us, in the last 18 months, 2 years, this kind of 24/7 screen time of just kind of sitting in a room, staring at a laptop or staring at a phone on Zoom calls and Teams calls. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this develops around kind of the hybrid kind of workspace now being talked about. But just reflecting then on your comments around LinkedIn, and it's still not that prevalent in your 18, 19-year-olds or 17, 18-year-olds, because I think you can now be on LinkedIn from the age of 13, which I think is a little bit strange. But certainly, I could see, I would advise, certainly when you're in sixth form and up, so A levels and beyond, you would want to start building out on LinkedIn. Why do you believe that it's still the take up still relatively low with your peers?
Because I think with other social medias compared to LinkedIn, what you can actually get out of LinkedIn is 100 times more than just browsing through Instagram, TikTok. Like, you're just being fed garbage on those. But LinkedIn, you can browse through it for a few hours and you come out feeling like you've learned something. That's what I see anyway. Obviously, it depends who you follow and stuff, but generally, I think that's what you get on LinkedIn. But then the amount of people I know on LinkedIn and like not just on it, but actively use it compared to the social medias that are just like feeding you crap is like way off. So that's why I think it's undervalued, and I think it will have a big blow up soon. But yeah, I think as people get older, they realize the importance of a network, and I think LinkedIn provides your online network for you, and that's what
Without reflecting on that is, and I think I know what the answer. I know what the answer is. Is it because the other platforms, just from a virality perspective, they're able to just attract, the masses? Obviously, Facebook's been around for as long as Facebook's been around, close to 3 billion monthly active users across all of its platforms. But do you believe that LinkedIn's just not cool, and because it doesn't have the filters, because you can't do the 15-second, 30-second, 3-minute videos? Although I'm now starting to see more and more TikTok videos kind of morph onto LinkedIn, so they're created on TikTok and then I've even done it myself, repurposed there. So do you believe that it's because it's that? And then a follow-up question: is there also is it because that in the education system, and I appreciate you're already doing it from your experience at your school, so this isn't kind of empirically statistical data, but it's not being taught in class, if you will, kind of from a business perspective, that, and I don't know why this would be, because I think it should be part and parcel of kind of every student that's leaving school should be kind of taught about the importance of building an online network. So it's just not trendy, and then it's not actually made relevant to your peers. Would that be a fair assumption, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's that it's not cool, because like when people see you've got a profile on LinkedIn and you've got a big connection, I think that it does seem quite cool to me anyway. But I think it's more that it's just, I don't know, it's just the addictive side of things. It's just easier to get home from school or work, say, and sit there just scrolling through funny videos and just things that obviously just give you dopamine, short-term dopamine in your brain. It just comes back to the addictive side. I don't know if you've seen the Social Dilemma, that documentary, where, as I said, things are literally just designed to keep you on there. And the way they do that is just feeding you information, funny information you want to see. And I think with LinkedIn, you've actually got to learn on it. Mm-hmm. So it's just people switch off, basically.
Absolutely. And I think, we all talk about the nefarious algorithm on LinkedIn, and it's the one that everybody tries to crack. But it's, it's certainly not as yes, there's the whole, it's basically gambling psychology and how all these platforms, how all these platforms work. But certainly with the other ones, there seems to be, it's much more granular in terms of the type of content that they push to keep you. And of course, they survive on majority of them purely on advertising, whereas LinkedIn doesn't, thank goodness. Yes, it has an advertising aspect to it, but it's got its recruitment tools, it's got its business development tools, and you can pay for premium services on LinkedIn as an individual to give you more access. Where of course all the other ones are free. So if something's free, then we all know that you are the product, as it were. So then the fact that you and I are talking, the fact that you've already set up kind of your own business, you run your podcast, you are unique in the fact that I would suggest you're technologically curious. So when did you first get onto LinkedIn, and what kind of prompted you to think, what, I'm going to give this platform a go?
I can't remember when I first signed it. I will have signed it really young, probably put some fake birthday down just because I wanted to be on every sort of platform and just see what it was like. But I started actually developing my profile properly around my just after GCSEs, coming into the sixth form type thing, as you suggested, because I just saw it as an opportunity to speak to people and see what's on there. And it was just information that I'd rather read sometimes than just flicking through Instagram. So that's the reason I set up. And then I quite enjoyed the professional side of it. Like, even though I was only just a school student, it made me feel quite important. Yeah. Putting all my education and qualifications and building up this profile that people can see me on. So I think that's the main reason I started to do it. And then I just got into it, like putting a few posts on there, and just, I just quite like the platform, to be honest, and think it's useful to be on. That's good. We should get LinkedIn marketing to get hold of that clip, get them to put it out. But to your point, what's interesting in terms of the work that I've done over the years,
I've worked with, they're not quite boomers, but they're kind of the Gen X into boomers, so late 40s, early 50s. And they have the same reaction to you when you kind of talk to them about what the LinkedIn profile is today versus what it was 5-10 years ago. It was basically a CV recruitment shop, and explain to them and work them through that your profile is a window into you as a person. And that's certainly what we've seen over the last 2 years or so, that LinkedIn has evolved massively in terms of the type of content that's being shared on there, the type of engagement, types of conversation that happen. I get the same reaction in terms of that sense of pride, that sense of I can now start to get the value out of this platform. And I believe that that's the transition that LinkedIn is going through now, is that the older generation that grew up with it, it was just a place to get a job.
Yeah,
recruitment consultants. You were hassled by recruitment consultants, so therefore I'm only going to come on it when I need to get something out of it. Yeah. Whereas you are already echoing what LinkedIn is becoming, is this place of community. It's this place of learning and development, and to help each other. So it's also going through an interesting kind of transformation from my perspective, because they're kind of having to cater for 4 generations or 4 profile of generation at the moment. And you sometimes get certain demographic going, this isn't Facebook, you shouldn't be sharing this type of content on there. Yet your generation that's coming through, and the millennials, this is pretty much how my perception is, how you all communicate with each other. And of course, their future revenue streams are you. So they need, in my view, to create a platform that is going to appeal to your generation, the next generation, sort of the mid-20s, the late 20 type sort of profile, where your communication, will come on to this a little bit further, your communication style and approach, in my view, and feel free to disagree, is very different to the communication style that I certainly grew up with, the older generation grew up with, because pre-social media, you've had to, ask your parents for permission to use the phone, as that was, fixed to a wall with a telephone cord literally going to it. And then you phone up and you'd have to have a polite conversation with the mum or the dad at the other end before, can I speak to Jacob? Or, yes, how is it? How's the day at school? Or you had to go, if you went out with your friends, if you couldn't get home in time, you had to go find a phone box and put 10p into a physical phone box, and then remember your telephone numbers to phone home to say you're going to be late. And some might say a simpler time, but we were then how can I put this? We were social in a different way, because it was predominantly physical, in terms of physical human contact. Then if we talked about this in your podcast around kind of sales, is that if I look at then kind of my role into selling, was 100% face-to-face as an estate agent, then in recruitment was 100% phone-based and face-to-face. And then we see this morph, email comes, social comes, and that there is a, rightly or wrongly, a view that the, again, younger generation, whilst they're social in terms of the digital sense, the generation aren't necessarily that confident in a face-to-face environment, because they're so used to being in kind of the digital environment.
No, I agree.
Is that fair? Is that a fair brushstroke summary? Do you believe?
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think it's just down to the fact that you don't get practice at it anymore. You don't, like, when, as you said, when you were younger, you were out with your friends. It just doesn't seem to be done anymore. So you've obviously had a lot of practice at speaking to people face to face. As you said, picking up the phone, speaking to people's parents. Like, you don't need to do that anymore, and just speaking to different people. Like, even when our generation do meet people, it's normally just your friends, and you can just text them straight away, be there at this time.
Yep.
You don't have to speak to anyone else. You don't have to learn to interact with different generations, different types of people. You're just around the people you like being with, and that's it, really. So I think it is a fair assumption, and comes with its benefits and downfalls, as you said. Like, obviously, typically our generation is good at texting on social media and eventually we'll be able to use this in industries like sales and stuff when technology becomes a bit bigger. But then again, the like social side of things is a bit down, I think. Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you? And again, there is. I don't believe there is a single answer to this, because it's a very complex kind of situation that we find ourselves in, and kind of we're now starting to say, in-person networking events are happening again, as even like people are trying to, should I shake hands, should I not shake hands, how do we go about kind of greetings, all the stuff that was just totally normal to us is kind of been changed anyway. So and it would have been interesting if you'd taken the EY gig, because an amazing organization, clients of mine, because obviously you're now in a small, nimble, fast-moving business where you kind of got this environment, and this environment is kind of normal for them. But how do you think the generation is, or let's flip it on its head, how do you believe that an employer should go about acknowledging that this is kind of the world that you are in, but how can they help and coach your generation to understand that, yes, that's what you do, but in the world of business for the time being, and this is going to be for the next 10 years or so, that this is kind of how you need to go about doing business, going to networking events, when you go to business meetings for the first time, or if you're going to be expected to kind of generate sales. So maybe from anything you've seen at school, or what you've seen in your own conversations, how do you believe that an employer should go about this approach when, dare I say it, if they haven't got kids, they may not necessarily understand the world that you're in, other than what you see in the Daily Mail?
Yeah, well, I think I did do the whole application process for EY, so I went through it and did all the interviews and stuff, and the way they went about it was they just had their thing. You apply for it, you do some psychometric tests and some numeracy tests and all that, and then you do a recorded interview, so it's not with anyone, you just record. They send you some questions, you have a timer, which was a bit weird, to be honest, just speaking to nobody, but I guess some people would like that as well, not having someone face to face. But I preferred the actual interviews where you'd speak to someone and you could like get what they wanted to hear and things like that. But yeah, I think employers nowadays should just be more considerate on the extracurricular side of things, rather than just if someone hasn't got good GCSE grades or A-level grades, then that's like, I wouldn't even look at their CV and stuff. I think, to be honest, I think CVs personally are a bit outdated. Like the guy that employed me, Connor, he's still quite young, so he was probably just a generation above me, and he basically said to me from having a podcast and what he's seen me doing on social media, that's the reason he can tell from that I'm switched on, and he would like to employ me that way, rather than he's never once asked to see my GCSE grades or my A-level grades, because I don't think they obviously are important. It gives you something to take pride in and work towards at a young age, but they're not the be all and end all. And just because someone has good grades, it doesn't mean that they're perfect for the role. I think social, you need to have a lot more interviews, basically one-to-one, to get, because people don't, like, a lot of people haven't had an interview that I know, my age anyway, their whole lives basically, and they can go to an employer and get a job without having an interview now. But I think having an interview, and you can define the people who have got the social skills that you're looking for, and just taking these extra skills rather than just school-based skills, and bringing them more into the situation, because it will give younger people more of an opportunity to develop their skills. And it will start in schools themselves. They'll start bringing in courses that help you develop like extra skills rather than just your academic ability.
And I think you're right. And it's an interesting, you certainly see the more traditional firms are changing their hiring processes, because they recognize that what was right 20 years ago, 10 years ago doesn't fit the modern world. modern world today. And I've started my new role with PA Consulting, and I don't fit the mold. I don't fit the mold in terms of what a traditional consultant would look like, and it was based on actually experience of working with me rather than necessarily looking at a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. There has to be a balance between academia, where academia is required for an aspect of the role, versus, to your point, your current employer, saw what you did online, right? You've got to get up some go. You've got the technical capability. That's what I want. You're demonstrating it straight out of the gate. That's what I'm looking for. And
like obviously for a role like an engineer, you're gonna need a good maths grade, obviously, or physics grade, but just you don't need like your English literature grade to be an A-star to do that. That's what I dislike about it.
Completely agree. And I think it also precludes good people who maybe just not had a fortunate start in life in terms of just how they happen to find themselves. Who could be more than capable to develop into the future, whatever it might be. Which is why I think apprenticeships are a really good and positive thing, because it creates diversity of thought, diversity of people, and so on.
And I think that people often almost sacrifice their social skills because they want to get the top grades across the whole board. Like when I did GCSEs, I think I did 10 or 11 GCSEs. So to try and get like an A-star in all of them, you'd have to sacrifice a lot of your social time to do that. And that's what some people decide to do, because they think it's the way to get anywhere in life is to have the best grades, but they obviously sacrifice going out and meeting new people for that, which I think is quite bad.
I completely agree. And just living life, you only have one goal on this ride, so make sure that you that you enjoy it. And then in terms of I'm trying to think what's the best way to kind of put this. So, and from your generation, in terms of an expectation of an employer, from a kind of a technology standpoint, a use of social media standpoint, based on how you now live your lives and how you communicate with each other, is there kind of a sense, or is there needs to be kind of a baseline from your perspective in terms of the technology capabilities or the technology that an organization can provide, that you would consider working for them, versus, well, they don't have XYZ, therefore don't care who the brand is, I'm not going to go and work for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think companies now have a standard to maintain of the technology they use. And me personally, I probably wouldn't go to a company that's outdated in the way they use social media and other technologies. I'm a big fan of AI. So if I see a company they might not be using it yet, but if they've got a plan to incorporate it into the future, I think that's a big bonus, and especially on the social media front, because it's what we all know how to use now. So if a firm isn't involved in it at all, I think it is quite outdated and is something that would put someone off. Yeah.
And on social media, it's an interesting one, because we leave a digital footprint wherever we are. And of course, you talk about what's on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. It doesn't really matter. All I can say is I'm very glad that social media didn't exist when I was your age, because I wouldn't want anything that I did documented when I was having fun. Yet we seem to be living in this world. And there's a piece the other day around TikTok in terms of it feels like that generation feels like they have to document like every aspect of their lives. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Jim Carrey film The Truman Show, which is around, it's a film around the Truman Show, and he realizes he's actually in a show, which the world are watching. Everything that he's doing is kind of forced upon him without he kind of, a bit like Sims, I guess, without him realizing. Now, of course, prospective employers can potentially see that. So you talk around your current employer, saw the good that you're doing, all that kind of stuff. But does your generation give consideration to what they're doing now may impact them at some point in the future, or is it young and carefree, it doesn't matter, I'll worry about that if and when?
Yeah, I think a bit of both. Like obviously we have a lot of from a young age now, you have a lot of talks on social media and just the internet in general about your footprint online, and that from like the age of 10, 11, you're told like your future employers will see this, but then comes down to the fact that you actually care and think about that when you're doing something stupid at that age, which I don't think you do.
No.
But as you grow up, like even when I was younger, to be fair, it wasn't that big to record stuff. Like we just had like messaging things. It still wasn't that as developed as it is today. So that's a bit better. But now I think like you just have to be so careful, because especially when you're like drunk or something, people are always recording stuff. And if you just do one thing stupid, you can get put on Instagram, and it could be the end of your career already, pretty much. Like,
indeed. Well, you saw, what happened at the Euro finals, and all the video footage that started to come out from that, and then the Reading Festival, some of the stuff I'm seeing that's appearing on TikTok, and these people have no idea they're being filmed in a certain state or situation that they find themselves in. It's kind of it's kind of out there, and I guess from an employer perspective, that's what employers have to kind of wrestle with, this balance between allowing their employees to be their employees, but in the same respect, you represent the brand. And all it takes is, for, to your point, something to go awry, then it's all of a sudden ex-employee at company does this silly prank or what have you. And in fairness, it happens to the best of us.
I mean, I think situations where always done, like everyone's done something like that. It's just your luck on who gets it filmed or not, like, if you know what I mean. And then that's what goes out there.
Indeed. I mean, you could be, I've partners at law firms have fallen foul of this, senior individuals have fallen foul of this. Recently over lockdown, people filming internal video calls when they weren't happy with this, and this being leaked. It's a tricky thing to navigate. So you mentioned you were on as we kind of wrap this up. You mentioned that you were on lots of platforms. Is there a platform out there which maybe I haven't heard of? So I'm aware of also the usual suspects. So you've got Facebook, Insta, TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn. Obviously, there's WhatsApp. There's Telegram.
Yeah.
Are there any other ones that maybe one that we haven't heard of that as a parent one should be aware of, or an up and coming one maybe?
I think Telegram's quite a new one that's being used a lot now for various group chats, especially in the whole crypto world. Everyone's using Telegram now to promote loads of things, really, which I think it's a good platform to use. But there's also platforms like Discord. I don't know if you heard that. It's been around for years, but I think that's almost making a comeback now. Like I've been invited to a few chats on that. But other than that, no, it's more based around the main ones, really, and then you just get sent to other links and other websites where you can do stuff, but not really a whole platform. No.
So we need to be across all platforms, it would seem, but also understand, what your generation is kind of not going through, but how your generation communicates and so on. So, Jakob, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on my podcast. Thank you
for having me on.
Feel free to connect with Jakob. I'll put his link into the profiles. I still can't do this thing on YouTube correctly wherever it's meant to go. And if you've listened to this podcast, please feel free to reach out to Jakob. But Jakob, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks again, Alex.